Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another victorious edition of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and now on Blue Sky at Hawk Blogger. And once again, we bring you a Robert Mays Monday presented by Pagliacci Pizza. And there's a lot to go over. This was a pretty adventurous week in the NFL. A very adventurous game for the Seattle Seahawks, and as you all can see, I am doing something that my in-laws think I'm crazy for doing. I'm taking the show again from their backyard. It's about 36 degrees out here, but I kind of like it. It's crisp, it's sunny, the air is fantastic. So hopefully this is a little bit better backdrop than what I typically present to you. Robert, it's good to see you, man. How was your Thanksgiving week?
It was good. It was good. I stayed home because we talked about last week. My dog isn't feeling super good, so my wife went to my in-laws, and then I stayed home and actually just went to my brother's house, and we had a really pleasant night. It was good to spend the time with him. My other brother swung by with my niece later in the evening. My grandma and my great aunt came over for a little bit, so it was the type of family experience I don't often have on Thanksgiving because I'm with
Mm.
my wife's family. So it was a nice little change of pace, even if it was a little bit different.
I don't think I know the Mays family tree. How big's your family?
I have two brothers. So
Okay.
I have two brothers. My dad's side is very small. I don't really have aunts and uncles on that side. My dad was an only child. But my grandma, my paternal grandmother, and my great aunt are really the two family members I have on that side. So it was nice to see them. And then my mom's family is huge, but we always spend Christmas with them. So that's typically how we divvy it up over here.
Where are you chronologically with your brothers?
I'm the oldest. Yeah.
Oh, you're
So
the oldest.
I'm the oldest. So I'm 2 years older than my middle brother, and then he's 2 years older than my youngest brother.
What kind of older brother was Robert Mays?
Awful. Awful. My wife and I always joke about this. We're both the oldest of three. And if you
Uh-huh.
look at just the archetypes of people that us and our siblings are, we are by the book oldest, middle, and youngest children.
Yeah,
Like
uh-huh.
just every single sociological, psychological study that has been done about what birth order means, we
Yeah.
fit that just to a T. So no imagination necessary. Whatever you think like a type A oldest sibling is like, that's me. Whatever you think a problematic middle sibling is like, that's my little brother. And whatever you think like a sweet, gentle, deferential youngest sibling is like, that's both of our youngest brothers.
Well, I think that speaks highly that you guys still, willingly chose to spend Thanksgiving together. So that's a good sign that you made it through the trials and tribulations of
We're
brotherly
working on it.
bonding. Yeah,
We're working on it.
it's not always easy, those childhood experiences. Speaking of traumatic, oh my God, Robert, I often start with the Bears with you because we get this unique opportunity to get the insight of a Bears fan, and what I think is one of the most fascinating and kind of important storylines in the NFL season. Number one overall pick, Caleb Williams. We haven't talked to you since your coach has been fired, as you expected to happen, and they had that catastrophic end of the game against the Lions. But I would guess you felt pretty encouraged by that game against Detroit. How did you feel coming out of that game?
Yeah, it's one of those scenarios where it's kind of how I felt after the Patriots game when they fired Shane Waldron. You had to do it. And that's how I feel about firing Matt Eberflus after that game. Considering the late game failures, going back all the way to the Washington game this year, and based on all the reporting that's come out, just the sheer mutiny that was happening in the locker room after the Lions game, you had to do this. And it's unfortunate,
Mm-hmm.
but I think we all kind of saw the writing on the wall. The mistake was made before the season even started. Bringing him back when you were drafting a quarterback number one overall, and not a single person would have blinked if you wanted to realign things in what had become a new era for your franchise. Deciding to run it back with a defensive minded head coach that hadn't had gangbusters success by any stretch of the imagination, rather than saying, what is the best path for us moving forward as an organization? That's where the mistake was made. And now that mistake has been rectified, even if it was a little bit rocky to get there.
It was a pretty clear mistake, even from the get-go. As you know, my conversations with fans that have no affiliation with the Bears were confused by that decision at the time, and I'm wondering, do you think that falls on the GM's lap? Is there any chance that he feels the heat for making that call, or does he basically get this do-over with the head coaching decision that's coming up?
Everything that they've said this morning. So Kevin Warren, who's the Bears president, and Ryan Poles obviously is their GM. They're doing a press conference right now, and Kevin Warren has been adamant in the fact that Ryan Poles will be back as the GM, which I understand, right? They screwed up. The biggest choice, arguably, you made as the general manager of the Bears was to keep Matt Eberflus coming into the season. That is a huge mistake. I do think that there have been hits, maybe overstating it. I think there's been enough general competence for Ryan Poles to keep his job as the Bears GM, even if this thing did not go well. Because I do think that there's an argument to be made for stability in these moments. You know, the example that I point to is what happened with Jason Light in Tampa, where if you look at the first couple years of Jason Light's tenure, the first several drafts of Jason Light's tenure, it was an absolute disaster. But I think maintaining some continuity and consistency can be good for an organization. And maybe I'm just trying to tell myself a story, but that's the path I'm choosing. That's the mindset I'm choosing to have moving forward with the Bears' decision to keep Poles and find a new head coach.
Do you think that it was potentially a situation where, I mean, they were driving down, they potentially could have tied, won that game. If they win that game, do you think that Matt Eberflus could have had his job saved, not only for the rest of this season, but potentially even coming back next year?
No, because I think the moment you fired your second defensive coordinator in as many seasons, it's over. You can't trust. We're going to give Ryan Poles an opportunity for head coach number 2. You could not give Matt Eberflus an opportunity for offensive coordinator number 3. Like that's two is enough. So I think the fact that they couldn't get the offensive side of the ball right, that was enough to just say, at the end of the season, we're going to move on and we are going to find a more stable infrastructure for our young quarterback and for this roster. So I think no matter what happened last Thursday, Matt Eberflus would not have been the Bears coach at the end of the season. I think this just sped up the process a little bit.
Yeah, certainly. It was most entertaining of the Thanksgiving Day games for sure. It was not.
I'm sure it was a thrill ride for everybody else.
Well, talk to us about what you noticed from the rest of the slate before we turn our attention to the Seahawks, where we'll spend most of our time. What caught your attention this week?
We led our show last night with the Eagles-Ravens game, and we talked about it for like 25 minutes, just because I felt like I really wanted to sit with what sort of team we were discussing here with the Philadelphia Eagles and what they have become and kind of how they feel right now compared to the rest of the contenders in the NFL. They're a wagon, man. I mean, they are just so good on both sides of the ball. And I think we always kind of understood that was a potential outcome on offense. The talent was undeniable. They have potentially the best offensive line in the NFL. That group has only gotten more physically imposing now that they have Mekhi Becton, which is just crazy. And you have skill position talent. We knew that. They were arguably the most talented team top to bottom on that side of the ball in the league. They make a few schematic changes. You drop Saquon Barkley into the equation. I think the ceiling on that side was very, very high. On defense, I wasn't sure. This is a team that completely bottomed out on that side of the ball last year. Vic Fangio is a legend. I'm from Chicago. I watched Vic Fangio create a transcendent defense here. And their defenses were pretty good in Denver, even as the rest of the team was struggling. He did not have a good year last year in Miami. It was a year where things did not click. I wasn't sure what to expect of him, in this stage of his career, going to a new team that had some pretty serious personnel concerns. Zach Bond wasn't Zach Bond in New Orleans. We had a lot of young defensive backs. What was this going to turn out to look like? And I think the answer right now is maybe the best defense in the NFL. And you combine that with the ceiling that they have on offense. And, we're talking about a team that 100% is in the conversation to win the Super Bowl this year. And I did not know if that was going to be the case coming into the season.
Sorry, we're having a little bit of internet issues over here. Hey, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Not sure what was going on. I think the Eagles certainly have corrected what was ever going on defensively. And I think it's interesting because you've got the Eagles and the Lions, two teams that identified a weakness in their secondaries and didn't just dip their toes in the water. They dove full head first into addressing that position with multiple draft picks or free agents or trades to address that. And they both seemingly come out the other side better for it. you look at some of the offensive lines around the league where teams have done that, like the Rams, hasn't exactly worked out quite the same way. So interesting just to see different teams going about addressing weaknesses on the roster and how quickly that can change. Um, let's turn our attention to the Seahawks game. Robert, I don't know if you watched how much of this game you watched in
Too much.
What a crazy, crazy game. Tell us what you thought watching that game.
I don't know what the verb is. I've joked about this a couple different times. If it's blue skying, whatever it is. I had a blue sky post after the second fumbled kickoff return that was just clamoring for the Seahawks to have one normal kickoff return in this game. That was before the third fumbled kickoff return and before they gave up like 2 more returns that went past like the 40-yard line. Yes. So that's its own element of this. The fact that no normal kickoff happened for almost the entirety of this game, which is its own thing. And then you have a 300-pound defensive lineman taking an interception back at 92 yards. We have a team that has 1st and goal on the 1 after getting a pass interference penalty that somehow comes away with that drive for absolutely no points. No matter where you want to start here, there is something insane that happened on that side of the ball or with that unit with the Seahawks and the Jets yesterday.
It is not uncommon to see a team fail from the 1-yard line in a goal-to-go situation. To see that team end up giving the ball back at the 16-yard line is something altogether different. So, I mean, the series in itself, Robert, is to find Ryan Grubb because they had, I think, 8 plays inside the 4-yard line, goal to go. 5 of them were pass plays. And I'm not positive, but there's a little clip circling the web where it shows Mike McDonald after one of the slant plays to DK Metcalf, seemingly wording the statement, "Why did we pass there?" And so I asked Mike McDonald about that series after the game. He didn't want to go into the thought process there, but they know that the short yardage situations is an issue. I just continue to wonder if there's a philosophical mismatch between Ryan Grubb and Mike McDonald.
I don't want to say I don't know anything about the situation as far as what the dynamics are there. It feels like when you're a defensive head coach, sometimes we can go too far with this. You can be a little bit too conservative and a little bit too obsessed with running the ball. But it would just surprise me if there was a defensive-minded head coach who didn't want a team that could assert itself on the ground on its own terms. And the fact that this team cannot is extremely frustrating. And I think the running game got decent in the back half of the game. You know, they had some moments, obviously, even the Charbonnet touchdown, the fact that you have to do all that nonsense to get that play to actually work, I think is pretty telling. But just the amount of negative runs in this game and just the inability with a guy like Kenneth Walker, who I think is arguably playing as well as any like non-Saquon Derrick Henry running back in the league, but we would never know it because of the circumstances that he's being placed in. The fact that you cannot run the ball with this guy right now, I can't imagine Mike McDonald is happy about that, considering what he has built with his defenses. And I'm sure his knowledge and his like deep-seated understanding that when you're an offense that can run the ball, it just makes it so much harder for the defenses that you have to play against.
We're talking to Robert Mays of The Athletic, brought to you by Pagliacci Pizza. Make sure you sign up at hello.pagliacci.com/hawk-blogger. Get all the best deals on Pagliacci Pizza. I know I love it and can't wait till I get back home so I can have a slice. Although the New York slices are pretty good too, I got to say. Sorry, Pagliacci. So, you know, we talk about the running game, and I'm glad you brought it up, Robert, because you can check me on this as an impartial observer. I thought for the first time in a few weeks in the second half of this game, I was seeing push. I was seeing holes. I was seeing, now some of those plays got called back, and holding, you know, is what it is. But we haven't even seen like plays called back in the last month. It seemed like there was opportunity there. It seemed like there was a little tiny step forward that made me wonder if maybe the repetition, maybe the three new starters on that line over the last 3 weeks, maybe there is a glimmer of hope that running game can get untracked. What did you see there?
I don't think I'm quite there yet.
All right.
I guess that's what I would say. Just because this is a Jets team that has been falling apart at the seams. And the fact that by the end of the game, you can maybe move the ball against a team that seemed for the last month has lost its will to exist. I don't know if I feel that good about being able to do that in the back half of the game against a team that is in the current state of the New York Jets, especially if you're a team that wants to make the playoffs, that potentially wants to make some noise in the playoffs. I still have some pretty severe doubts over the course of 4 quarters against a team that wants to be there, what the running game is going to look like.
So you also saw in this game not much of a passing attack, right? While the Jets had some of their cornerbacks, which I think all 3 of them left this game at some point, DK Metcalf was largely absent, had a couple of plays. JSN had some plays, but they were off script. Tyler Lockett was again an afterthought. Noah Fant came back, but still was not much of a factor. What is your thought about what you're seeing from a player like DK Metcalf?
He's always been a little bit frustrating to me. And I think that yesterday was another good example of that. He, despite his frame and despite his physical gifts, he's just not somebody who plays that big. He's just not somebody that's going to go attack the ball. And I was looking up the numbers last week, and it was for a completely different player, but I was just curious about it. And I was sorting, if you look at PFF and just contested catch rate, and for players over a certain amount of targets, he's dead last in the league. He's just not that sort of player. He's not going to attack the ball. And I think yesterday was one of those games where you noticed that. There were a couple of those moments that stood out. He's always going to be a big play threat down the field. But so many of those big plays, DK is just dropping the ball into his hands 25 yards down the field. So the fact that you have Tyler Lockett as an undersized receiver, JSN is a fairly undersized receiver, and your guy who's 6'3", 225 that's supposed to be your big-bodied receiver doesn't play like it, I think that occasionally that can lead to some of the boom and bust feel for what this passing offense looks like.
Knowing that even with that being the case, he does demand a lot of attention, more attention than anyone else on that offense from the secondary, and that does dictate some coverages, and it allows you to do some things. Where are you currently on the discussion of whether you would bring him back? If you were building this Seahawks team, he's going into the last year of his deal. Do you extend him?
I don't know if I would do it just sight unseen, without seeing what next year would look like and without thinking about what type of team you want to be moving forward. And I think it would all depend on the price as well. DK Metcalf is still a very useful, productive NFL player. I've made this comparison in the past, but when I was at Grantland, almost 12 years ago now, I think it was literally 10 or 11 years ago, Bill Simmons wrote a piece about Russell Westbrook. And he said that sometimes with these guys who are super talented, instead of fixating on the 90% of the things that they do well, sometimes we fixate on the 10% of the things they do poorly. And I think that DK Metcalf is kind of like that as a receiver, where he does so many things well, and there's so much potential that I think sometimes I can gravitate toward what makes it frustrating to watch him, but that doesn't discount what makes him a useful player. So I still think that the attention he draws and the field stretching ability and the downfield stuff, all of that is worth noting. I just think that there's still a gap between him and the most impactful receivers in the league because of those weaknesses that occasionally show up.
So let's switch sides and talk about the other side. Leonard Williams. A lot of people, when the Seahawks made that trade last year, including a lot of Seahawks fans, were a second and a fifth, and then you sign him for $21.5 million. He's a good but not great player. That's a little bit of a questionable move. He's been pretty darn dominant the last 2 weeks, and as of today, through this week, he is the 4th highest graded interior defensive lineman in the NFL by PFF, for whatever that's worth, behind Cam Hayward, behind Chris Jones, and behind, who is the third guy? Someone else.
Dexter Lawrence, maybe?
Dexter Lawrence, thank you.
Yeah.
So what are you seeing from Leonard Williams, and is it more than you expected to see?
It absolutely is, because I was in that same camp where it's Leonard Williams is a good player, but is Leonard Williams worth a second-round pick and $21 million a year heading into his age 30 season? I thought that was pretty rich for somebody who has been a useful player, but not somebody that is a game-wrecking force or somebody that you're consistently talking about or worrying about. I think he's right now in the best stretch of his entire career, which in your age 30 season, I think is saying something. So I'm happy to eat crow about my doubts concerning the Leonard Williams contract. I understood the trade in the moment, but I think sometimes you chase one bad decision with another where you say, okay, we made the trade. Now we have to extend him. And I thought that the price tag as part of that decision was a little bit rich for me. But right now, he's absolutely been worth it.
One of the things that was interesting, and as I was talking to him last night, and he mentioned that this is a stretch that reminds him a little bit of when he was back with the Giants. We had a conversation during training camp that he said the last time he was used the way he's being used by the Seahawks this year, including playing a lot of defensive end, was under Patrick Graham in New York with the Giants. And those were the years where he had 11 and a half sacks. He had his best pass rushing years. And so it's interesting that potentially some of the differences over the past few years has also been utilization and scheme. It's also interesting, Robert, I don't know, you'd know better than I. Leonard Williams last night said that he is given freedom by the coaching staff to actually call on field whether or not that they should do a twist a game to do certain pass rush schemes on the defensive line pre-snap. Is that something that you've heard other defensive linemen have the freedom to do, or that coaches give their defensive linemen the freedom to do?
I have heard about that. I don't know how prevalent it is, but I'm not shocked to hear that because I do think that there are some teams and some players specifically who are given that sort of autonomy. Yes.
Yeah, it was something I'm going to want to learn more about. But all that being said, the Seahawks had one of their lowest pass rush pressure rates of any game this season. There was only 19% pressure rate. That was only a little bit better than the 18.9% pressure rate they had against the Bills. So they were not getting pressure, I think partially because Aaron Rodgers was getting rid of the ball quickly. But, this wasn't a big pressure game, but Leonard Williams had 2 sacks and a 92-yard interception return for a touchdown. And there you go. The Seahawks defense gives up only 14 points in this game, and 7 of those points came after a D. Williams kickoff return fumble at the 27-yard line. So, you see him, you see Julian Love. Again, the Jets have not been world beaters, but the Seahawks now have stacked up 4 games where they haven't given up more than 17 points on defense to the opposing offense. Curious if there's any new insights you had watching them play defensively.
I think just more of the same. I think that we've really seen them take a serious step over the last few weeks. And again, like you mentioned, I think some of that pressure stuff is Aaron Rodgers just getting rid of the ball very quickly. And that's part of the other frustration. And one of the reasons that you can absolutely dominate an offense like the Jets. It's all go balls and slot fades. Like it's the only thing he has any interest in throwing anymore. I think we kind of understood that early in the season, but you watch that game yesterday and it is just so plain that he has no interest in reading anything out. He has no interest in hanging in the pocket. If he has a one-on-one that he likes, he's just going to take that thing. And for a defense that is as put together as the Seahawks are right now, that's just not going to work. You're going to win those every once in a while. You got Job on one, and you tried to hit that over and over and over again, and that's not a winning formula against a defense that is capable of playing at the level the Seahawks are right now.
Did you get a chance to watch the Arizona-Minnesota game or any part of it?
I sure did. Those are the 2 games I think I was paying the most attention to in that early slate, just because, I don't know, I have like a weird fixation with the Seahawks. I love Geno. I've always been a Mike McDonald fan. I just traded for Kenneth Walker in my intense keeper fantasy league, which has been a
bold move.
I'm already regretting it. I'm already regretting it. I'm sitting there. I have David Montgomery, and I'm like, David Montgomery is going to have a game in week 16 where he gets 6 carries for 18 yards, and I want the more dynamic player. And the fact that I have had to go from watching the Lions running game and caring about it to watching the Seahawks running game and caring about it, I should really take more care with my mental health and well-being. That being said, yes. I was fixated on that game for a huge chunk of the day. And then I watched a good majority of the Arizona-Minnesota game because I think that was the best game from the early slate, just in terms of, playoff chances, everything else, the opponent. So I watched a good chunk of that one.
Yeah, so I have not had a chance to watch that game. I did review a little bit of how it seemed to progress. The Cardinals seem to have control of that game. They seem to outplay the Vikings in almost every way. End up going 1 for 6 in the red zone, had 10 penalties for almost 100 yards, obviously a few turnovers. How did the Cardinals blow this?
I think that sequence in the red zone near the end of the game ultimately is what swings it. So they have a 1st and goal from the 5. They get a false start, makes a 1st and goal from the 10. That's doable. You can overcome 1st and goal from the 10. Kyler takes a horrendous intentional grounding that takes them from the 10-yard line back to like the 25-yard line. Then ultimately they get back inside the 5. There's like a 9-yard run, and then there's a little catch and run from Trey McBride that takes them down inside the 5-yard line. They have 4th and goal from the 4 with, I want to say, 2-ish minutes left in the game, and they kick the field goal. And so you kick the field goal to go up 6. What that does is it tells the other offense, we have to score a touchdown. And so they get the ball back, Minnesota does. During that drive, they have a 4th and 7 in field goal range. If you're up by 3, even if you had missed that, they're kicking a field goal to tie the game. Instead, they go for that 4th and 7. They go down, they score a touchdown, game's over. So the game swung on that sequence. And I think that the reason Arizona was kind of in control of that game for huge portions of it, they were phenomenal when blitzing yesterday. They just absolutely tore up the Vikings, especially on 3rd down. Minnesota was 1 of 8 on 3rd down and won the game. And I think that's a testament to some of those swing high leverage moments that happened, later in the game, because I do think Arizona did a very good job for 3.5 quarters.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was just nosing around Next Gen Stats this morning because what else am I going to do? And I noticed the Cardinals had the #1 pressure rate, I think, in the NFL this week. And this was a defense that before playing the Seahawks was like 31st or 30th in the NFL in pressure rate. And they gave the Seahawks all sorts of trouble. And I just assumed, now that's kind of the Seahawks bailiwick this year, is they make everybody's pass rush look fantastic. But they then go into Minnesota and they do it again. Have they found something new? Is it the addition of Baron Browning? I don't think Darius Robinson played, right? They said he might, but I don't think I saw him in the box score at least.
I think the finding something new is blitzing 6 guys. They were bringing a lot of heat in that game, and there was a lot of like cover 0-ish looks, or they'd overload one side. And I think that's just the nature of the beast with the Cardinals pass rush right now. They don't have the horses to get pressure with 4, but they do enough weird stuff from a pressure perspective that I think that they can affect the quarterback in defined passing situations. And that's what happened yesterday. The Vikings, every single time they got into a 3rd and medium or 3rd and long, the Cardinals heated them up with some sort of big blitz look, and they got home on a huge chunk of those. So you mentioned they had the highest pressure rate in the league yesterday. That's because on their blitzes, according to Next Gen, they had an 80% pressure rate.
Wow.
So when they blitzed yesterday, they were making Sam Darnold very uncomfortable, and it was about to win them the game until it didn't.
So that was a high leverage loss, and the Seahawks get a bizarre, zany, pick your adjective win that they really shouldn't have by almost any measure. And they end up now a full game up on the Cardinals, and they will be going to Arizona this week to play for what might be the division. What's your expectation now, given what you've seen from these two teams over the past few weeks heading into that game?
I really don't know what to make of it.
Right.
I have so. We were talking about this on our show last night, and Derek Klassen, who's my co-host, he loves Geno almost as much as I love Geno. And we were talking about the 4 units involved in that game: Seahawks offense, Seahawks defense, Cardinals offense, Cardinals defense. And I think the group that collectively we have the least amount of faith in right now among those 4 is the Seahawks offense.
Yeah,
which
for sure.
That's such a strange place to land. And I think that's a testament to the Cardinals moving from strange curiosity to actually solid defense. And the Seahawks, instead of figuring things out over the course of the year, I think you can make an argument that this thing looks as aimless as it has at any point this season on that side of the ball.
Yep.
So the fact that that's where we are on December 2nd, where I feel more confident in the Cardinals defense than I do about the Seahawks offense, not something I expected to say in the year of our Lord 2024.
Well, I think I would 100% agree with that. Would you also agree that the best unit of the 4 is the Seahawks defense?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
so
I mean, after the way they played against the Cardinals offense a couple weeks ago, I think you can make a very serious argument for that.
And if that's the case, then it is going to be a fascinating clash between maybe the best unit, which generally my overall philosophy, Robert, for any NFL season is the best single unit on one side of the ball is the team that usually has the best chance to win the Super Bowl, like the most unstoppable unit on one side. And this is not going to be that. But between these two teams, you've maybe got the best unit on the Seahawks and the worst unit of those four. Against what the Cardinals have just been solid. They've been, the word I continue to come back to is they're a rugged team. Like they are a solid, rugged team on both sides of the ball. The Seahawks managed to bottle them up to, I think, 17 yards rushing between Kyler Murray and James Conner the week prior. I don't expect that to happen a second time. And one of the things I did notice, Robert, is the Seahawks have moved their alignment to play a lot more kind of bear fronts or double eagle or what have you, which is a little bit of a narrower alignment. And we saw the Jets run 76% of their rushing plays outside the tackles. It was their highest percentage of the year by a long shot. And so I think we're seeing teams start to adjust to what the Seahawks have been doing on run defense, and it'll be interesting to see if the Cardinals make a similar adjustment there. So last thing I'll ask you before I bid you adieu and let you get on with your week is – big game last night for the 49ers. It seemed like a closing of a chapter. What did you see in that game? What do you think is left for this 49ers team the rest of the year?
I think for the rest of the year, it's just about trying to keep things from getting too terrible, right? Can you just get to the end of the year without the bottom totally falling out? I don't know where I'm at right now about long-term postmortems. I think that's something I'm going to sit with here over the next week or so. I think we're going to do a show about it at some point in the next couple of weeks. Just these teams that were supposed to be, if not contenders, then playoff teams. Teams that came into the season with playoff aspirations. The bottom has fallen out. What does it look like when they pick up the pieces? I haven't thought enough about the Niners to have like a really solid set of opinions about that, but I think that's kind of where we are. It's all right. This season, disaster. Season from hell, right? There's no way around it. Do you still have enough of your core team, if they can come back healthy next year, where you can still be a team with playoff or championship aspirations? I don't know the answer to that. But the fact that that's even up for debate and we're asking that question, I think is all you need to know about what sort of season the Niners have had.
Yeah, I think as much as I am not a 49ers fan, I will say that the assembly of that roster and the way that they went about it was exactly what I like to see if I'm trying to have my team build a championship roster. It was the most talented, had the most blue chip players on both sides of the ball, physical, tough, was not quarterback dependent, had, pretty solid coaching and scheme advantages. And to this point, it hasn't been enough. And I think if you have a debate with other football fans or experts about whether the franchise transcendent quarterback is what you need or the best overall roster, at least for this round, it's a win in favor of the people arguing for that transcendent quarterback, because Patrick Mahomes is the single biggest reason the 49ers don't have one and maybe two rings with that roster.
It's always the argument. It's that when you pay the quarterback, and it inevitably erodes the pieces that you can put around him, are you still able to win? And I think that that's going to be the biggest question about what the Niners do with Brock Purdy coming out of the season, right? I mean, I think that they will probably pay him. I don't think that they're necessarily wrong to pay him based on the way that he has played over the last couple of years, right? I mean, if I'm Brock Purdy's agent, this is a simple discussion. He has been as good or better as a guy like Tua. I think he's been in the similar conversation to like the way that Jared Goff has played over the last couple of years. Those guys are making $52 million a year. I'm worth $52 million a year. Whether that's a good thing for the 49ers to entertain, I think that's an entirely different conversation. And I don't even know if that's a comment about Brock Purdy. I think it's just a consideration of the limited resources this team is going to have to put a team around Brock Purdy like the one they've had over the last couple of years.
Do you think what kind of trade package do you think he would command if they decided, you know what, we're gonna invest back in rebuilding? What do you think he would return?
It's a great question.
It's got to be multiple firsts, don't you think?
Yeah, probably.
Young,
yeah.
I think he's worth multiple firsts at least.
I think multiple. I truly don't know. I truly don't know. I think that it takes one team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if there's a team, okay, let's see, here's, for example, I'm trying to think if they financially can afford this. They probably could.
Yeah.
If you're the Steelers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you feel like, all right, we just need some sort of answer here coming out of the year. Would you make a move like that? They probably wouldn't, just because that's not how their organization operates. But if you look at the roster, would a team like that make sense for him? I think this is all moot and just like we're just having fun, because I do think he will be the 49ers quarterback moving forward. But I think it would only take one team, and I think a first and change is probably the price that would make sense.
All right, I got a couple quick hitters for you, and then sorry, I lied. I was going to let you go. But first, Rams, Saints. Rams coming out of there with a close win. Any thoughts about what you saw or observed from that game?
I just wish they could play 4 quarters any single time they took the field. That's just my only thing with the Rams. They got shut out in the first half for the first time since the Super Bowl, where they got absolutely blanked by the Patriots. And then they come out in the second half, and they have a 62% offensive success rate and score 21 points. So I just don't know what to make of them, because there are stretches where the offense is putrid and unwatchable, and then there are stretches where they look like one of the best 5 offenses in the league. And it probably lands somewhere between those 2 points. I just don't know exactly where it lands.
All right, last thing, random thing. Kirk Cousins struggling a little bit more. Do you think he's with the Falcons next year, or do you think that they move on to Michael Penix Jr.?
It's a good question, and I think that this kind of it gets back to the Steelers conversation, and like a team that needs a quarterback. You can trade for Kirk Cousins next year and pay him $30 million. I think for some team, that is potentially attractive for teams that have painted themselves into a corner. And if you're the Falcons and you can get an attractive trade package for somebody like Cousins, and you can somehow steal back a little bit of draft capital as part of this equation and put one more piece either around Penix or into that roster if you move on from Kirk, I think that you at least have to think about it.
If I'm the 49ers, I'm trading Brock Purdy for 2 first-round picks if I can get it. I'm trading for Kirk Cousins and using the first-round picks to help build my roster out and setting up a short-term, cheaper quarterback that we know Kyle Shanahan loves. Don't think that'll happen, but that's what I would potentially suggest. So I'm sure they'll listen to me. Robert, thank you so much for joining us again. Hopefully the internet issues were not too bad. Hopefully I didn't get frozen.
Not at all.
Some crazy position. But thank you, and thanks to Pagliacci Pizza for bringing you on each and every week. Have a great rest of your week.
Sounds good. Talk to you soon.
All right. That was Robert Mays. And if you haven't already, make sure you check out Pagliacci's Autumn Harvest Pizza, roasted delicata squash, layered with roasted Brussels sprouts, mozzarella, and Parmesan over roasted garlic oil. Absolutely delicious pizza. Although I am personally a pepperoni guy, I think it is amazing. So here's the thing. I don't want to risk it too much with the internet that keeps freezing for me. Hopefully it hasn't been too ragged for you guys. But here we are, Seahawks 7-5. Speaking of ragged, certainly a ragged position that they've been in a season to get to this point. I see things a little differently than Robert on the offensive side. I want to go back and watch again, but I saw progress on the run blocking. I saw progress on creating some gaps, and I'm not overstating it. I'm not saying it was good, but it has been hopeless the last few weeks. And this, for me, turned a little bit of a corner. And so they're going to be going up against a very good run defense in Arizona. Hard to run against that team. I am really interested to see if they're able to build on what I thought was progress in the run game, because what I wrote about in my morning after column, among other things over there on hawkblogger.com, is that I believe that it is worth whatever the cost in terms of wins, in terms of whether they make the playoffs or win a division. If they lose, but they find their way to being a competent run team, that this offensive line demonstrates the continuity and the push and the coordination necessary to create a more consistent, reliable run game. That over the long haul, because going to continue to tell folks they're not winning the Super Bowl this year. I don't want to dash anyone's dreams, but that's not what this year's been about. So as long as you're not going to win the Super Bowl, the most important thing is finding out who you are and building pieces that you're going to be able to assemble together to build on top of in future years. If you are a team that is only pass-centric and you're able to get through and win a few games, fine. But that is not how you're going to be able to take this team that is a defense-centric coach and a defense-centric roster and get where you want to go. You've got to have a running game to complement what's going on there. And I think they're starting to get closer. And so I think that's one of the big takeaways for me. Now, PFF did not like Satao'Lamea's great game. They gave him an awful grade, like in the 30s or something like that. I have not watched each of his snaps again. And, unlike other people, I do assume that there's probably some legitimacy to why his grades were that low. When I've gone back, I remember I thought Christian Haynes played a very good game against the Patriots. And then PFF gave him a very bad grade. And I went back and watched, and sure enough, Christian Haynes was giving up quarterback hits that I hadn't seen and missing some twists and just not being as good of a player as I thought he was at first blush. So I do assume Satao'Lamea made some egregious errors. Not super shocked, but I actually liked what I saw. So I'm not going to be a slave to PFF grades and say that he's a bad player or he's hopeless. I thought he moved well. I thought he showed some physicality. I'm kind of interested to see what he can bring with another start. I assume he's going to get another start. I think they're going to stick with him. And I think the right side of that line, him and Abe Lucas, hopefully can start getting coordinated, and we'll see what comes out of that. So, yeah, I mean, generally speaking, you look at this game, there's not a lot of it that you want to bring into future games. That special teams performance, one of the worst in the history of the Seahawks franchise, maybe one of the worst in the history of the NFL. 2 fumbled kickoff returns, another muffed kickoff return, a kickoff return by the opponent for a touchdown, multiple other kickoff returns that could have gone for a touchdown, a blocked extra point. It was bad. It was really bad. So I don't think you ever want to see that again. I think they absolutely have to make a change at returner. I don't think you can keep explaining it away or giving air cover to a rookie in D. Williams. They have to put someone else back there. I just don't think they can continue to do what they've been doing. There's been too many just inexcusable possession issues. Like, forget whether or not they are good at returning the ball. The decision making has not been good, and the ball security has not been good, and you just can't have that. For when your defense is doing their job and you are just praying that your punt returner is actually able to keep the punt that's kicked to him, that's not good enough. You got to be better than that. They can't tolerate that. It's not fair to the rest of the team. So I think they've got to make a change at that position. And then we'll see what happens with Michael Dixon. He had the back injury, was not, according to Mike McDonald, not able to come back and punt if he needed to in this game. So who knows? Hopefully he is okay to play in this game against Arizona. It will be a warmer weather game. You can be sure of that. But that's another thing to watch out for. Will the Seahawks have to bring in another punter? What will it mean in terms of, will they have to work with another holder in case Michael Dixon's unavailable? So those are all things to keep an eye on. I would assume Michael Dixon's able to, through, different therapy and stuff, be able to loosen up that back given a full week. But who knows? That's just something to monitor. And then offensively, I just don't think things are going I don't think things are going in Ryan Grubb's favor right now. And I think as much as I probably defended Ryan Grubb as much or more than anybody else, I still am a Ryan Grubb fan. I still am hopeful that this turns around and finishes with a flourish. And I think there's the potential for that. But I really wonder if that goal to go situation and the play calling that happened there, if that was kind of the nail in the coffin, so to speak. I can explain away some of what Ryan Grubb has done over the course of this season, given the offensive line that he was handed to start the year, given the fact that he's got playmakers at receiver and a quarterback that he believes in. and an offensive line that couldn't block effectively in the run game. But there was no explaining how they came to the play calls they came to, from my perspective, in that situation. You cannot pass the ball 5 times inside the 4-yard line. You can't do it. And if you are, there's got to be at least a couple of those situations where you scheme somebody open. And the fact of the matter was, they didn't fool anybody. The closest was on the play to Noah Fant, where Fant seemed to be open, and I think Geno missed him. Yeah, I have to go back and rewatch, but the pass was not on close enough to be caught. But I think Fant was open enough that should have been a touchdown. But for the most part, you throw. I hated the fade. The fade play call on 1st and goal from the 4. The Seahawks have been running effectively on that drive, and they should have run the ball there. I mean, I think all signs pointed to that. And if you're going to throw it, when's the last time the Seahawks effectively ran a fade route in the red zone? Like, even like DK Metcalf, I don't think he's come down with one this year. So I just think that was a really, really bad play call. I thought that whole series of plays was poor. And if that, you can find it if you look for it on Twitter, but the clip of Mike McDonald very clearly mouthing, like, why did we pass there? Not a good sign. Not a good sign for Ryan Grubb. So, yeah, that's something to keep an eye on. And otherwise, at least the defense continues to play well and continues to give Seahawks fans a reason to feel proud of the effort that's going in each and every week. And, they travel to Arizona for what is, I think, probably the game to decide the division title. The Cardinals, just so everyone knows, I'll pull it up here so I have it in front of me, but the rest of the schedule for the Cardinals looks like this. They get the Seahawks at home this week, and then they host the Patriots, so they get 2 games at home, one against the Seahawks, one against the Patriots. Then they travel to the Panthers. Now, the Panthers are playing a little better than they had been. Then they travel to the Rams. That's not the toughest game, but a little bit tougher. And then they're home against the 49ers. And who knows what the 49ers are going to look like last game of the season. They might even sit their starters by that point, because they will be out of the playoffs for sure. So it's not the toughest schedule, especially when you compare it to what the Seahawks are facing, which is going to Arizona. Their 2 home games are against Green Bay and Minnesota. And then they travel to Chicago on a Thursday night game on a short week, and then they travel to LA. So there's not an easy game left in the schedule for the Seahawks, and they're going to have to find a way to not just end up with more wins. If they don't win this game against the Cardinals, they're going to have to either win the tiebreaker somehow by getting an NFC or divisional record that's better than the Cardinals, or they're going to have one more win than the Cardinals the rest of the way. That seems unlikely. So you win this game against the Cardinals, you get the tiebreaker in the head-to-head, and you can tie the Cardinals and still win the division. I think your chances there are much better. So it's going to be an exciting end of the season. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to going back to Arizona this weekend and seeing if the Seahawks can win what will be their 4th straight game. Would be also move them to 5-1 on the road. They are now 4-1 on the road. They've played really well, and historically they've played pretty darn well in Arizona. It's usually a very well-attended game by Seahawks fans. So we'll see. I think it's going to be interesting, and the Cardinals are coming off a pretty disappointing defeat against the Vikings. A lot of adjustments that will probably be made from that game and from the first game between these two teams. All right, everybody, if you have not already, please give the show a like and click subscribe. You can also head on over to Blue Sky, find me there, and give a follow if you haven't already. Twitter and Instagram, the same thing. Also on Facebook, if you didn't know, we're on Facebook at Hawk Blogger. I haven't been checking Facebook. I'm not a big Facebook guy, to be honest, but we had like a million interactions on Facebook last month. So clearly a lot of you are on Facebook or have found us on Facebook, and I appreciate you and appreciate the support. I will try to do better about staying in touch with people over there as well, as I'm a one-man crew. Please make sure you sign up at patreon.com/hawkblogger, support the show. And tomorrow I will be back with you with Mike Randall of FTN. We'll see what else I have in store, and then we will get into Tail of the Tape. We'll get into First Look on Wednesday morning. We will have Real Hawk Talk this Wednesday. We'll get it all going once again. So appreciate all of you. Thank you for tuning in. And thanks, everybody, for supporting Pagliacci Pizza, our sponsor for Robert Mays Mondays, as well as the Morning After column over there every Monday after every game on hawkblogger.com. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Take care and have a great rest of your day.